In this tutorial, you will learn to understand the difference between literal and figurative language, to recognize different types of figurative language, similes, metaphors, personification, and exaggeration. When a writer uses words according to their dictionary definition, he or she is using a literal language. Click the top image to see literal language used to describe the sky. When a writer uses words in an imaginative way to express meanings beyond the literal meanings, he or she is using figurative language. Figurative language is sometimes referred to as figures of speech. Click the bottom image for an example of figurative language.
So this concept of literal versus figurative is something we really haven't talked much about in class, but we will get to it when we get into our novels in verse, and you will have assignments where you have to identify a figurative meaning versus a literal meaning. So make sure you kind of look at these examples before you move on.
The clouds were white against the blue sky. Explanation. This sentence says exactly what it means.
That's most often the kind of language that you're going to find in nonfiction text, like informative.
Jenna's fingers leapt across the piano like tiny dancers. Explanation. Jenna's fingers aren't dancers, but the description helps you picture her playing the piano.
So this is the kind of language and the reason of why we slow down when we read poetry. If we just read quickly through that, we might be like, cool, this is like a fantasy sci-fi book. Jenna has weird little dancers for her fingers. No, not really. It's just a way to really capture exactly what a great piano player that she is.
Figurative language often compares an object or person with something else. When reading figurative language, use your imagination to understand what the comparison means. Decide whether each sentence is using figurative or literal language. Drag the sentence into the correct box.
Since this is just a video and you can't actually drag the sentences into the figurative language box or the literal language box, I'll give you a few seconds to read through and then I'll put them where they should go. Okay, so this top box, the stars were diamonds in the night sky. That is definitely figurative. Stars really aren't diamonds, they're balls of gas. You can ask Mrs. Mers. Look at the next one. The cat's coat was soft to the touch. Yeah, sometimes when you pet a cat, it is very soft. Last one. The water in the pool was like ice against Jose's skin. Sometimes it feels that way, but Jose would be hospitalized in the ER if it really was icy. So that is figurative.
Metaphors are one type of figure of speech. A metaphor compares two unlike things by saying one thing is another thing. Metaphors do not use the words like or as to make a comparison. Read each word or phrase below, then click it to see it used as a metaphor.
Eric is a monster on the field. This would be good poetry if it followed up with an explanation of what exactly he does out there. Katie is a happy ray of sunshine. So once again, if this were in a free verse poem, we would have some details of her actions or her what she says that proves what a happy, sweet girl she is. Jacob is the monkey of the family. Looking at that picture, I would say that he's probably pretty silly and playful, like a monkey.
Metaphors can be more than one phrase or sentence. Extended metaphors are comparisons that continue through several sentences of prose or lines of a poem. The swamp at night is a symphony. The bullfrogs play bass, keeping the beat for the cricket's melody, and the mosquitoes try to harmonize. Explanation: the swamp at night is compared to a symphony.
So another example below is that a metaphor sometimes isn't directly stated. That's why they're so hard to identify.
The red and orange leaves blanketed the forest. Explanation: the red and orange leaves are compared to a blanket, though this comparison is not directly stated.
But the leaves act like a blanket and how they thoroughly cover and keep the ground warm.
As you know, metaphors compare two seemingly unlike things without using the words like or as. Extended metaphors span several lines of a poem or several sentences in prose. Read each example below. If it is a metaphor, drag it into the box.
Okay, I'll give you a few seconds to read through these four and see which ones are metaphors. Okay, the queen's golden hair glistened in the sunlight. I don't see hair being compared to sunlight, I just see it shining that way. So I'm going to say no. The sun's flames warmed the swimmer's skin. Flames are not being compared to skin. The flames are just having an action. The teacher's bark was worse than her bite. So this is kind of one of those subtle metaphors where it's saying a teacher's, the way they yell, sounds much like a bark. So I'm going to say yes, that's a metaphor. Oh look, I got it. Yay me. Last one. Students leapt through the doors to go home for the day. You really don't leap through the doors. You noisily walk through them, as I can hear clear down the hall. But leaping is something that would be more like an animal that you would be compared to. So I'm going to say that's a metaphor. And they're calling me a big fat liar. Let's see. Oh, see, I totally disagree with that. A sun really does have flares and fire on it. Maybe we should go ask Mrs. Mers on this one. She's your science teacher.
A simile is another kind of figure of speech. Unlike a metaphor, a simile uses the words like or as to compare two unlike things. Read the text and answer the questions.
Grandma clucked like a hen as she fussed over the sick child. So grandmother, the action of clucking is being compared to a hen. Next example, the students were as hungry as wolves at lunchtime. That is so true. I see you people down there. So students just got compared to wolves, not sandwiches.
Writers use figures of speech to help you more clearly picture what they are describing. You've just learned about similes and metaphors, which are two types of figures of speech. Move the slider to see how something can be described using a simile and using a metaphor.
Okay, so this little slider is the yellow dot. So a football coach is like, the coach was like an angry bear as he yelled at his team. We are comparing a coach to a bear using the word as, like. You don't have to use both, remember that. Actually, it's really like is the comparison word here. So that makes it a simile. If you're just saying he's an angry bear, or she, actually it's he, right? Got the pronoun his. The coach was an angry bear. That is a metaphor. It's comparing him without using like or as. Let's look at a girl's long hair. Oh, I have to slide it. I'm trying to click. Okay, Amy's hair was as long as a lion's mane. Hair of a girl being compared to hair of a lion, using the word as, that's a simile. Amy's hair was a golden lion's mane, falling to the middle of her back. This is where metaphors are sneaky. It's hard to sometimes know it's being compared when it just is saying that that's what it is. But really, it is comparing a girl's hair to a lion's, just doesn't use the like or the as. I don't think we need to really go this far, do we? I'm skipping it. I'm bored.
A third type of figure of speech is personification. Writers use personification when they give human qualities to something that is not human. Read the sentences and answer the questions.
The wind brushed Lisa's hair as she stood on the beach. So the non-person item is wind. Wind can't really brush hair, but a person can. That's what I said, computer. Okay, next example. The flowers were bright in the morning light. The color of a flower really can be bright, so I'm going to say no. There you go.
Exaggeration is another type of figurative language. When something is described using exaggeration, its true actions or qualities are extremely overstated. Writers typically use exaggeration to create humor or emphasize an idea. Match each label with the correct image to see an example.
So this tutorial is using the term exaggeration, but as we've talked about in class, we are using the term hyperbole. And it is true that writers typically use exaggeration. Do you know who else does? Middle schoolers. You people speak in hyperbole all the time, and you don't even know it. Think about it. It's true. The runner flew down the track at a mile a minute. Not really. That'd be amazing. But they wanted to prove the point that this runner was extremely fast. I feel like I'm just matching words and pictures. The lion must have been 50 feet tall. No, that would be a statue. Someone just wanted to show you how big the lion was. The waves that day were a mile high. They weren't really, but they probably were very scary high, and I would have been at the pool, not the beach, because that sounds terrifying.
When a writer uses language in an imaginative way that is not literally true, he or she is using figurative language. Metaphors, similes, personification, and exaggeration are types of figurative language. They help writers make comparisons between things that are otherwise not similar. Similes are figures of speech that compare two different things using the words like or as. Metaphors draw comparisons between two things without using like or as. They state that one thing is the other. My fingers are icicles.
All right, so there is your summary. I hope this gave you some good review and practice.